Have you ever looked at a photo of yourself from years ago and felt like you were looking at a stranger? It's not just the passage of time or a different haircut. It's that look in the eyes, a version of you that hadn't yet learned how to brace for impact. When we go through something that shakes us to the core, our identity doesn't just bend, it often shatters. We spend so much time just trying to survive the aftermath that we don't realize we've left the old version of ourselves behind. You might find yourself standing in your kitchen, the sun hitting the floor in the exact same way it did years ago. But everything feels tilted. You look at your hands, and they feel like someone else's hands. You go through the motions of your day, brushing your teeth, pouring coffee, answering emails. But there is a profound sense as if you are not there. It's as if the person who used to inhabit your life moved out in the middle of the night without leaving a forwarding address. This is the quietest part of trauma. It's the moment the adrenaline fades, and you are left with the silence of a life that no longer fits. You try to put on your old personality like a favorite sweater, only to find the sleeves are too short and the fabric is scratchy. The things that used to make you laugh now feel distant, and the goals you once had feel like they belong to a character in a book you read a long time ago. We often talk about the event itself, but we don't talk enough about the mourning period for the self we lost. There is a specific kind of grief that comes from missing you, missing the way you used to trust your gut, the way you used to walk into a room without scanning for the exits, or the way you could fall asleep without 1,000 thoughts racing like a car engine that won't turn off. You might feel a sense of shame about this change. You might look in that mirror and whisper, "Where did you go?" You might even feel angry at yourself for being different now, for being more cautious, or for losing that spark of spontaneity. But I want you to look closer at that reflection. If you feel like a ghost in your own life, I want you to know that's not a sign of permanent damage. It's actually a sign of your system's incredible intelligence. When the mirror changed, it was because you had to adapt. You had to become someone who could survive a storm. And the old you wasn't equipped for that particular weather. Carl Jung spoke about the necessity of these transitions, suggesting that we cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of life's morning. For what was great in the morning will be little at evening, and what in the morning was true will at evening have become a lie. This shift in the mirror isn't a lie. It's a new, difficult truth. It is the starting point of a much deeper journey. You are currently in the in-between space. You aren't who you were, and you aren't yet who you are going to be. It feels hollow and cold right now, like a house with all the furniture moved out. But that emptiness is actually a canvas. The fact that the old mirror shattered means you are no longer confined by the old reflection. You are being given the chance, painful as it is, to decide which pieces of your identity are worth picking up and which ones you can finally leave on the floor. So, if you looked in the mirror today and didn't recognize the person looking back, don't turn away. Stay for a moment. Soften your gaze. That stranger in the glass has been through a lot. They have carried you through things you thought would break you. They might be tired, and their eyes might look a little heavier, but they are still here. And as long as they are still here, there is a way to build a home within yourself again. This isn't the end of your identity. It is the beginning of an honest one. We often use the word broken to describe how we feel after trauma. We think of ourselves like a dropped glass or a cracked plate, something that can be glued back together, but will never be whole again. We carry this heavy internal narrative that we are somehow less than we were before, as if our value was tied to being untouched by life's hardships. You might feel like you're walking around with a damaged goods tow that only you can see, making you pull away from people because you're afraid if they get too close, they'll see the hairline fractures in your foundation. But I want you to sit with that word for a second. Broken. It implies that your primary function is to be a perfect vessel. And if you have a chip or a crack, you've lost your utility. This is a story we've been told by a world that prizes the shiny and the new. But it is a story that ignores the reality of being human. We aren't mass-produced objects coming off an assembly line. We are living, breathing individuals. You might look at your life and see the parts of your personality that feel shattered, your lost confidence, your heightened anxiety, the way your joy feels fragmented. It's easy to look at these pieces and feel a sense of mourning. You try to hide the cracks with a forced smile or by staying busy, hoping that if you move fast enough, no one will notice the gaps. But the weight of trying to appear unbroken is often more exhausting than the trauma itself. It is a secondary burden we place on our own shoulders, demanding that we be seamless when we have every right to be scarred. What if those cracks aren't failures? What if they are actually the places where your true self is trying to breathe? There is a profound depth that comes from falling apart and having to decide which pieces to pick up. When things are perfect, we don't have to look at the mechanics of who we are. It's only in the breaking that we see what we are actually made of. Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." That choice doesn't start with being perfect. It starts with looking at those jagged edges and realizing they don't make you a lost cause. They make you someone with a story that hasn't finished being written. Think about the way we treat things we love when they wear down. We don't throw away a beloved book because the spine is cracked or the pages are dog-eared. We cherish it more because those marks mean the story has been lived. Your life has been lived. You have encountered the sharp edges of the world, and you are still standing. That isn't brokenness. That is evidence of endurance. When we stop labeling ourselves as broken, something shifts in our internal atmosphere. The pressure drops. We can stop trying to perform wholeness and start practicing honesty. You might find that your cracks allow you to see others more clearly. You might find that because you have felt the weight of being shattered, you have developed a capacity for empathy that is deeper than anything you possessed before. Your broken pieces are often the parts of you that are the most sensitive, the most intuitive, and the most capable of profound connection. Imagine taking those pieces of yourself, the grief, the fear, the resilience, the quiet strength, and instead of trying to hide the seams where they meet, you decided to highlight them. Instead of wishing the cracks away, you acknowledged them as the very things that make your identity unique. Healing isn't about erasing the fact that you were hurt. It's about changing your relationship with the scars. It's about looking at the weight you've been carrying and realizing that much of that weight came from the shame of being damaged. Once you drop the shame, the pieces don't feel so heavy anymore. They just feel like parts of a story, parts of a life that is still very much worth living. When we are hurt, we build walls. It's a natural, brilliant response of the human system. It is the mind's way of saying, I will never let this happen to you again. Without even realizing it, we begin to design a life that is essentially a fortress. You might have become the person who is always fine, the one who never asks for help, because needing someone feels like a dangerous vulnerability. Perhaps you became the person who is hyper-aware of everyone else's mood, scanning the room the moment you walk in to see if the emotional weather is safe. These traits aren't who you are, but they are the architecture of how you stayed safe. Think about the ways you've modified your behavior to avoid pain. Maybe you stopped being the one who speaks up first because silence felt like a shield. Maybe you started over-preparing for every tiny task, becoming a perfectionist because you felt that if you were flawless, no one could hurt you. Or perhaps you've noticed that you have a habit of disappearing, not physically, but emotionally. You go quiet, you withdraw, you become a ghost in the room because being seen feels like being a target. It is so easy to look at these habits and judge them. We call ourselves people pleasers, or we say we are avoidant or too sensitive. We treat these parts of our identity as if they are character flaws we need to scrub away. But I want you to look at those walls differently for a moment. If you lived in a place where it rained every single day, you would eventually build a very sturdy roof. You wouldn't call the roof a flaw or a weakness. You would call it a necessity. Your survival architecture is exactly like that roof. It was a masterpiece of engineering created by a version of you that was just trying to keep your heart from getting soaked. The problem is that the weather of our lives eventually changes. But we keep living under the old roof. We keep the walls up long after the threat has passed. You might find yourself pushing away a kind friend because your safety system flags their closeness as a potential risk. You might stay in a job or a situation that makes you miserable because the walls you built have become a cage. The very things that saved your life back then are now the things that are preventing you from living it now. Carl Jung understood this deeply, noting that the The pendulum of the mind oscillates between sense and nonsense, not between right and wrong. Your survival strategies aren't wrong. They made perfect sense at the time. They were the most logical response to an illogical situation. When you look at your hypervigilance or your tendency to shut down, try to see the little child within you who designed those systems. That version of you was so brave. They took the little bit of power they had, and they built a sanctuary. It's important to look at these survival strategies not as permanent parts of your soul, but as old uniforms you used to wear for a battle that is now over. Imagine standing in front of a closet filled with these old uniforms. There is the heavy coat of calculated silence. There is the rigid boots of constant productivity. There is the mask of everything is perfect. You can reach out and touch the fabric of these traits and say, "Thank you for protecting me. You kept me warm when it was cold. You kept me safe when I was small." You can appreciate the protection they gave you while acknowledging that you don't have to wear the armor 24/7 anymore. You are allowed to take the helmet off and feel the sun on your face. You are allowed to realize that while the walls were necessary once, you are now the architect of your own life. And you can choose to put in some windows. You can decide to build a porch where people can sit with you. Healing your identity means slowly, carefully, dismantling the parts of the fortress that you no longer need. It's a terrifying process because for so long, the walls were the only thing you knew. But as you take down one brick at a time, you'll find that the you who exists underneath the architecture is still there. They are maybe a bit shy, but they are ready to breathe the open air. You aren't losing yourself by letting go of your defenses. You are finally meeting the person those defenses were meant to protect. There is a part of us that we try to hide. The parts that feel too much, too angry, or too sad. After we've been through something difficult, we often develop a deep fear of our own internal world. We worry that if we let ourselves truly feel the depth of our resentment or the sheer scale of our grief, it might swallow us whole. So, we push those feelings into the basement of our minds and hope they stay there behind a locked door. Jung called this the shadow, and he reminded us that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Think about the moments when you felt a sudden, inexplicable surge of irritation at a friend's success, or a wave of coldness toward someone who was only trying to be kind. Maybe you've noticed that you have a habit of harshness toward yourself, a voice that whispers you aren't doing enough even when you're exhausted. These aren't just random moods. These are the sounds of your shadow knocking on the basement floor. The shadow is made up of all the parts of your identity that you were told, or you told yourself, were unacceptable in order to survive. Perhaps when you were younger, being angry wasn't safe, so you tucked your anger away and became the quiet one. Now, that anger lives in the shadow, leaking out as passive aggressiveness or physical fatigue. Or maybe you had to be strong for everyone else, so you exiled your need for comfort. Now, your shadow shows up as a deep, hollow loneliness that hits you in the middle of a crowded room. We spend so much energy holding the door shut on these parts of ourselves, trying to maintain a persona that looks balanced and healed to the outside world. But the more we ignore the shadow, the more power it gains over our daily choices. If you find yourself reacting intensely to a small comment, or feeling a sudden wave of exhaustion when things are finally going well, that's your shadow asking to be seen. It isn't trying to sabotage you. It's trying to reintegrate. It's like a person who has been left out in the rain for years. They aren't shouting because they're mean. They're shouting because they're cold. Healing isn't about keeping those basement doors locked and pretending the lower level of your house doesn't exist. It's about taking a lantern and slowly, bravely walking down those stairs. It's about realizing that the things you feared were monsters are actually just exiled parts of your own heart, waiting to be brought back upstairs. When you finally look at your anger, you might find that underneath it is a fierce sense of justice that you can use to protect your boundaries. When you look at your neediness, you might find a beautiful capacity for deep, soft connection that you've been starving yourself of. Facing the shadow is an emotional reclamation. It's saying, I see you, and you belong to me too. It's admitting that you are complicated, that you have been hurt, and that you have parts of you that are messy and unpolished. This is where true identity begins to form, not in the perfection of the light, but in the honest acknowledgement of the dark. When you stop fighting yourself, you stop being divided. You become a whole person who can stand in the sun without being afraid of the shape they cast on the ground. You realize that your history didn't just give you scars, it gave you a landscape. And every part of that landscape, even the parts in deep shadow, is part of the home you are building within yourself. One of the hardest parts of healing is the quiet, persistent grieving of the person you were before the world got heavy. We often get stuck in a painful loop of thinking, if only this hadn't happened, I would be successful, I would be happy, I would be light. We look back at that version of ourselves, the one who laughed without hesitation or trusted without a backup plan, and we feel a profound sense of theft. It feels as though the best version of our identity was stolen, leaving us with a person who feels like a second-rate substitute. This nostalgia for a past self can easily become a prison. You might find yourself trying to force your current, tired heart to run at the pace of your younger self. You might judge your current need for rest or your new boundaries as weakness because the person you were 5 years ago didn't need them. But you are trying to live up to the ghost of someone who doesn't exist anymore. That person was built for a world that looked different. They were operating with a map of a city that has since changed its streets. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from pretending the ground didn't shake. We try to get back to normal, but normal is a place that no longer exists on our map. Recovery isn't a journey backward to retrieve your old self. It's a journey forward to meet the person you are now. It's about realizing that while that before version was beautiful, they were also untested in the ways as you have been tested. Carl Jung once noted that we cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of life's morning. If you try to carry the morning's expectations into the evening, you will miss the specific beauty that the twilight offers. The person you are today is wiser, more resilient, and possesses a depth that the before version couldn't even imagine. That younger version of you knew how to sail in calm waters, but the person you are today knows how to survive a shipwreck and build a boat from the debris. It is okay to sit in the quiet and cry for that person you used to be. It is okay to miss your innocence. But at some point, for the sake of your own heart, you have to give that version of yourself a proper goodbye. You have to stop treating your current self like a broken version of a perfect past. You are a new creation. You are a person who has walked through fire and come out with a different perspective. When you finally let go of the before version, a strange thing happens. The weight in your chest begins to lighten. You stop performing and start existing. You stop comparing your current progress to an impossible, ghost-like standard. You realize that you don't need to find your old self to be worthy of a good life. That person did their job. They got you here. Now, it's time to shake hands with the person who is standing in the mirror today. This new version of you might be quieter. They might be more selective about who they let into their inner circle. They might have a lower tolerance for noise and a higher need for peace. These aren't losses. They are the refinements of a soul that has learned what truly matters. You are allowed to take up space as you are right now, scars and all. You are allowed to be proud of the person who survived, even if they don't look like the person you planned to be. The before version was a beautiful start, but the now version is the one who is actually living the story. Identity isn't just a set of thoughts or a collection of memories. It's a physical experience that lives in the very fiber of your being. You might notice that even when your mind is telling you everything is fine, your shoulders are up near your ears, or your jaw is clamped shut, as if you're holding back 1,000 unspoken words. Your body is the most honest historian you will ever own. It remembers the tension of the moments you had to stay small, and it carries the weight of the times you had to be strong, even when your mind is trying its best to move on. Have you ever walked into a room and felt your stomach drop before anyone even spoke? Or perhaps you've noticed a sudden, heavy exhaustion that hits you the moment you're asked to do something you don't really want to do. That isn't laziness or random anxiety. That is your identity speaking to you in its first language, the language of sensation. After trauma, we often become disconnected from this language. We treat our bodies like a vehicle. We're just driving around. Or worse, like an enemy that keeps sending us false alarms. We try to think our way out of feelings, but you cannot debate a racing heart into being still. For many of us, the body became a place that didn't feel safe to inhabit. So we moved upstairs into our heads. We became experts at overthinking, analyzing, and intellectualizing our pain, because staying in our thoughts felt safer than feeling the hollow ache in our chest or the trembling in our hands. But as Carl Jung suggested, the body is the most significant part of the soul. When we ignore the body, we are ignoring a massive part of who we are. Healing your identity means learning how to move back into the downstairs of your own life. It means learning to listen to the whispers of your nervous system before they have to turn into a scream. Think about the quiet signals you've been ignoring. Maybe it's the way your breath stays shallow in your chest when you're around certain people, or the way your legs feel restless when you're forced to stay in a situation that doesn't serve you. When you start honoring these physical cues, you stop being a passenger in your life and start being the driver. If your gut says no, and you listen to it, you are reclaiming a piece of your identity that was lost when you were taught to ignore your own instincts to keep the peace. Relearning this language is a slow, gentle process. It's about noticing the way your feet feel on the floor, or the way a warm cup of coffee feels in your hands. It's about realizing that when your chest feels tight, it might be a part of you asking for a little more space to breathe. When you stop fighting these sensations and start curious conversations with them, the static of trauma begins to clear. You start to realize that you aren't crazy or overreactive. You are simply highly attuned to the world around you. This physical reclamation is a radical act of self-love. It's saying to your body, "I'm sorry I left for a while. I'm back now, and I'm listening." As you begin to trust your body again, your identity begins to feel more solid. You aren't just a collection of ideas anymore. You are a grounded, living presence. You start to move through the world with a different kind of grace. Not the grace of perfection, but the grace of someone who is finally, truly, at home in their own skin. You realize that your body isn't just a place where pain happened. It's the place where your healing is currently taking root, one breath at a time. Trauma often feels like a series of things that were done to us, leaving us feeling powerless and adrift. When we go through an experience that overrides our yes or our no, it's as if the steering wheel of our life was ripped out of our hands. We get used to the passenger seat. We get used to the idea that our preferences, our desires, and our boundaries don't really matter, because, in the end, the world will do what it wants. But to heal your identity, you have to slowly, carefully find the small areas where you still have agency. You have to prove to yourself, one tiny decision at a time, that you are back in the driver's seat. This doesn't have to be a grand, life-altering gesture. In fact, it's often better if it isn't. When the weight of the past is heavy, big choices feel terrifying. Reclaiming your power starts in the mundane, quiet moments of a Tuesday afternoon. It can be as simple as choosing exactly what you want to eat for breakfast, rather than what's easiest or what someone else expects. It can be the decision to wear a specific color because it makes you feel like you, or deciding to turn off your phone for an hour because your soul needs a break from the noise. Think about the micro choices you make every day. For a long time, you might have made those choices based on survival, asking yourself, what will keep the peace? Or, what will make me invisible? Reclaiming choice means changing the question to, what do I actually need right now? Maybe it's the choice to walk away from a conversation that feels draining, or finally saying no to a request that you've been saying yes to out of a sense of obligation. Every time you make a choice that aligns with your actual internal reality, you are laying a heavy, solid brick in the foundation of a new identity. You are proving to yourself that you are no longer just a person things happen to, but a person who makes things happen. You are signaling to your nervous system that the emergency is over and that you are allowed to have a say in your own existence. It is a radical act to honor your own no after a long time of being forced to say yes. It is equally radical to honor your yes, to allow yourself to want things again, to pursue a hobby just for the joy of it, or to seek out comfort without feeling like you have to earn it. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But you cannot become who you are if you aren't the one making the decisions." For a long time, your identity might have been shaped by the choices made for you or against you. Now, you get to be the one who decides. You might feel a strange sense of guilt when you start choosing for yourself. You might feel like you're being selfish or difficult, but that guilt is just the old survival system trying to keep you in the passenger seat where it thinks you're safe. Push through that quiet resistance. Choose the route you want to take home. Choose the people you want to spend your energy on. These small victories accumulate. They weave together to form a safety net of self-trust. Eventually, you wake up and realize that the hollow feeling of powerlessness has been replaced by a quiet, steady strength. You aren't just surviving the day, you are authoring it. You are no longer defined by what was taken from you, but by what you choose to keep, what you choose to build, and who you choose to be in the face of everything you've endured. There is a strange, quiet beauty in the process of rebuilding. We often look at the mess of our lives, the unfinished projects, the complicated emotions, the days where we can barely get out of bed, and we see it as proof that we've failed. We think that if we were truly healed, our lives would look like a clean, organized room where everything has a place. But growth isn't a straight line, and it certainly isn't tidy. Think of a building that has been weathered by decades of storms. It has a character, a presence, and a story that a brand new structure simply lacks. The wear and tear isn't a defect. It's the history of its strength. Finding meaning doesn't mean you have to be glad that the mess happened. You don't have to wrap your pain in a bow and call it a gift. That is a common misconception that makes us feel even more isolated. Meaning isn't found in the trauma itself. It's found in the way you have responded to it. It's found in the fact that despite the chaos, you are still searching for the light. It's found in the small, brave acts of getting up, trying again, and refusing to let your heart turn to stone. As Jung noted, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. This means accepting the mess as part of the masterpiece. It means acknowledging the days when you're tired, the days when the broken pieces feel sharp and catch on everything, and the days when you feel like you're finally winning. When you stop fighting the reality of your experience, when you stop screaming at the mess to go away, something miraculous happens. The energy you were using to suppress your pain, to hide the clutter of your soul, suddenly becomes available for your growth. You start to see that your history isn't just a weight you are dragging behind you. It's the soil you're growing out of. Think of the way a garden works. It requires the dirt, the rain, and the decaying leaves to create something lush and green. Without the mess of the earth, there is no flower. Your identity is the same way. The difficult chapters, the confusing setbacks, and the moments of deep uncertainty are the nutrients for the person you are becoming. You might notice that because you have sat in the mess, you have developed a specific kind of vision. You can see the beauty in other people's struggles. You can recognize the quiet courage in someone else's shaking hands. You have developed a capacity for empathy and depth that wasn't there before the storm hit. That is meaning. That is the gold that is refined in the fire. The mess doesn't define your worth, but it does define your depth. When you stop trying to clean up your identity to make it presentable for the world, you finally give yourself permission to be real. You realize that you don't need a perfect life to have a meaningful one. You can be a work in progress and a masterpiece at the same time. You can have a heart that is a little bit scarred and a lot bit beautiful. Finding meaning is the moment you look at the wreckage of your past, and instead of seeing a graveyard, you see the foundations for a new kind of home. It's the moment you realize that the mess didn't break you. It broke you open. And in that opening, there is finally room for the real you to stand up, look around, and begin to build something that actually fits the person you have become. Integration is the moment you stop seeing yourself as a collection of good and bad parts and start seeing yourself as a whole, complex human being. It's the breath of relief that comes when you finally stop trying to edit your own soul. For so long, you may have felt like a house divided, putting your healed self in the window for the world to see, while hiding your wounded self in the back rooms where the light doesn't reach. You might have tried to separate your strength from your vulnerability, as if they were enemies that couldn't sit at the same table. But the art of integration is realizing that you cannot have one without the other. Think of a piece of pottery where the cracks have been carefully filled with gold. This is an old way of looking at repair that doesn't try to disguise the damage. The cracks are still there. They are visible. They are part of the object's history, and they are permanent. But they are no longer the point of weakness. In fact, they have become the strongest and most precious parts of the piece. This is what integration feels like. It's acknowledging that you can be both scarred and beautiful, both hesitant and brave, all at the exact same time. You don't have to hide what you've been through to be worthy of respect or love. Your history isn't a secret you need to keep. It's the very thing that gives you your unique shape and your incredible capacity for empathy. When we try to fix ourselves by cutting out the parts of us that were hurt, we end up feeling hollow. We lose our depth. But when we integrate, when we say, "This part of me is sad, and this part of me is resilient, and both are me," we finally start to feel solid. It's like learning to hear the harmony in a song rather than just the individual notes. Some notes are low and heavy. Others are bright and soaring. On their own, they might feel incomplete, but together, they create a melody that has a soul. Your life is that melody. The moments where you fell apart are just as essential to the song as the moments where you stood back up. Carl Jung once noted that we don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Integration is that process of bringing the light and the dark together until they are no longer fighting. It's looking at your younger, hurt self and saying, "I see why you did what you did. I see why you were scared. You're part of me, and I'm taking you with me into the future." You stop being a person who is recovering and start being a person who is becoming. When you practice integration, the broken pieces stop feeling like sharp edges that might cut you. They start feeling like the seams of a well-loved garment. They are the proof that you have been through the world, that you have felt its weight, and that you are still here, standing in your truth. You aren't a broken version of a person who used to exist. You are a whole person whose history has given them a perspective that the unbroken world can only imagine. You are a masterpiece of survival, a living work of art that is being integrated piece by piece into something more honest and more beautiful than you ever thought possible. Healing is not a destination where you one day wake up and the past is gone. It isn't a finish line that you cross where suddenly the memories stop having weight or the scars completely vanish. Instead, it's a quiet, daily practice of choosing yourself over and over again. It's the realization that while you cannot change the chapters of your life that were already written, you are the one holding the pen for the chapters that remain. You are moving from a place where you were defined by what happened to you, to a place where you are defined by how you walk forward. Imagine standing at the edge of a long, dark forest. For a long time, that forest was your entire world. You knew every shadow, every cold wind, and every difficult path. But now, you are stepping out into the open air. The light might feel a bit too bright at first, and the openness might feel a bit intimidating after years of being braced for impact. That's okay. Walking toward the new sun doesn't mean you have to run. It just means you keep your face turned toward the warmth. You are finally allowed to take up space. You are allowed to be different than you were before the storm. One of the most beautiful parts of this new identity is the permission to be in progress. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to be fixed to be happy. You can carry your history with you, not as a heavy chain, but as a source of quiet wisdom. You are the one who knows how to survive, which means you are also the one who truly knows the value of peace. The gold is in the dark. You have been into that darkness, and you have brought back the gold of your own resilience, your own empathy, and your own truth. You are no longer waiting for someone else to tell you that you are okay. You are deciding for yourself. Every step you take away from the shame and toward self-compassion is a victory that the world cannot take away from you. There will still be days when the clouds come back, and that's part of the landscape, too. But the difference now is that you know the sun is there. You know that you have the tools to build a fire if it gets cold, and you know that you have the strength to wait for the morning. You have learned to trust the rhythm of your own healing. You have learned that your broken pieces were actually the seeds of a much deeper, more authentic version of yourself. As you move forward, remember that the most authentic version of you isn't the one that never suffered. It's the one that survived, learned to listen to the whispers of their own soul, and decided to stay. You are not a ghost of your past. You are the architect of your future. You are more than enough, exactly as you are, right in this moment. The horizon is wide, the air is fresh, and for the first time in a long time, the path belongs entirely to you. Keep walking. The light looks good on you. We often think of an ending as a door that slams shut, a clean break between the person we were and the person we are becoming. But true healing is more like a bridge that stays open, allowing us to walk back and forth between our memories and our hopes until the distance between them doesn't feel so terrifying. This journey of reclaiming your identity isn't about reaching a state where you no longer feel the echoes of your past. It's about reaching a state where those echoes no longer dictate the direction of your feet. You are learning to live in the after, a place that is neither the before nor the trauma itself, but a third space, a home you have built with your own two hands. Think about the quiet moments that happen when no one is watching. It's the moment you catch your reflection in a shop window, and for the first time in years, you don't immediately look away with a sigh of disappointment. It's the moment you realize you haven't apologized for taking up space in a conversation for an entire hour. It's the moment you feel a spark of genuine curiosity about a new hobby or a new person. And you notice that the old, heavy shield of cynicism didn't automatically slide into place. These are the micro-miracles of an integrated identity. They are the evidence that the soil of your life, once so scorched and dry, is beginning to hold water again. There is a profound dignity in the way you carry yourself now. It's a dignity that doesn't come from being perfect, but from being honest. You have stopped trying to fit into the small, cramped boxes that other people, or your own fear, tried to put you in. You have realized that your identity is not a static thing, not a monument carved in stone, but a living, breathing river. Sometimes the river is turbulent, sometimes it is stagnant, and sometimes it is clear and fast-moving. But it is always the river. It is always you. As you walk toward this new sun, you might still feel a phantom weight on your shoulders from time to time. You might still have nights where the old shadows try to whisper that you haven't changed at all. In those moments, I want you to look at your hands. Look at how they have held you together. Look at your feet and how they have carried you across terrain that would have broken someone who hadn't been through the fire. You are a living testament to the fact that the human spirit doesn't just endure, it evolves. You are no longer a victim of your history. You are the primary witness to your own transformation. You have taken the fragments of a shattered mirror, and instead of trying to glue them back into the old shape, you have used them to create a mosaic. A mosaic is beautiful specifically because it is made of broken things. It has a texture, a play of light, and a complexity that a flat, unbroken surface can never achieve. This is your life now. It is complex. It is textured. It is brilliantly, undeniably yours. The work of healing is never truly done, and that is the most hopeful thing about it. It means you are always allowed to grow. It means you can always add another room to the house of your soul. You can always change your mind, find a new joy, or set a new boundary. You have reclaimed the most precious thing any human can possess, the right to define yourself. So, take a deep breath. Feel the air fill the lungs that have breathed through the darkest nights. Feel the ground beneath the feet that have found their way home. You are not just recovering. You are becoming the architect of a self that is finally, fundamentally, and beautifully free. The story isn't over. In many ways, for the real you, the one who is no longer hiding, it is just beginning. And it is a story that is absolutely worth telling. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What is one small choice you made today just for yourself? Let's support each other in the architecture of what comes next. This is our new home for long-form healing content. Subscribe here to stay connected. Thanks for being here.